The evening the Seattle Art Museum unveiled its most celebrated design exhibition of the decade was the same evening. Mara Hollins discovered her marriage was already dead. She didn't learn it from Spencer. That wasn't his style. Spencer Holt communicated through intermediaries, through paperwork, through the cold language of legal documents that arrived with precision and without warmth. The same way he ran his company, the same way he had run their 6 years together. The envelope was propped against her studio monitor when she returned backstage after greeting the museum's board. A plain white envelope with the return address of Hartley & Associates, the most expensive divorce firm in the Pacific Northwest. Her name printed on it in clean serif font, not her married name, her maiden name. Mara Hollins. As if he had already erased the 6 years that came after. She stood very still in the narrow hallway behind the main gallery, while the sound of applause drifted through the walls, her guests celebrating the collection she had poured herself into. The furniture, the spatial installations, the handcrafted room arrangements that had taken everything she had. 3 critics from the Times had called it transformative. A collector from Dallas had already inquired about exclusive rights to 2 pieces. Spencer hadn't shown up. She had told herself it was a business dinner he couldn't reschedule. She had told herself a lot of things over the past 2 years. She opened the envelope with steady hands. The words inside moved in and out of focus. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Irreconcilable differences. Effective immediately upon filing. Filed 3 days ago. Mara pressed her back against the wall and breathed through the shaking that started in her hands and moved upward until it lived somewhere behind her sternum. A museum coordinator passed with a clipboard and a wide professional smile that faltered when she saw Mara's face. "Mrs. Hollins, is everything all right?" "Fine," Mara said, folding the papers back into the envelope. "Just give me a moment." She gave herself exactly 3 minutes. Then she straightened her dress, tucked the envelope into her bag, and walked back into the gallery to smile and shake hands, and answer questions about her creative process. She did it the way she had done everything difficult in her life, quietly, completely, without letting anyone see the cost. She had grown up in foster care in Spokane. She had put herself through design school, on scholarships, and night shift work at a printing company. She had built her reputation one project at a time before Spencer walked into a gallery opening in Portland and told her she was the most talented person in the room. She had believed him. For 6 years, she had believed him. But she had also, slowly, stopped believing in herself. Spencer was good at that. He had a gift for making the people around him feel smaller without ever raising his voice. "Your instincts are too experimental," he would say. "Corporate clients want safe, not interesting. Let me handle the pitches. You just deliver the work. You're too attached to your vision. That's not how real business operates." She had let him handle the pitches. She had let him represent her portfolio to his developer contacts, always through Holt Properties, always under the company umbrella. She had told herself it was practical. It was a partnership. It was what married people did. She didn't know yet what he had done with that trust. By the time she drove home through the wet November streets of Seattle, her chest felt hollow in a way that was different from grief. It was the specific emptiness of someone realizing they had been holding a door open that had been locked from the other side for a long time. The condo was immaculate. Spencer's things were already gone. Not all of them, he was too strategic to be obvious. But the small things, the watch case from the bathroom counter, the leather travel bag from the closet, the framed photo from his desk, clean, surgical, minimal. He had been planning this for a while. On the kitchen island, a single sticky note in his handwriting. "My attorney will be in touch regarding the property division. I hope we can keep this civil." Mara stood in her kitchen and cried for exactly as long as she needed to. Then she washed her face, put the note in the trash, and started figuring out what came next. What came next was Boston. Her college friend Diane had been asking her to visit for 2 years. When Mara called and said she needed to get out of Seattle for a while, Diane asked no questions and sent her the address of a furnished sublet 2 blocks from her apartment in Jamaica Plain. 2 weeks later, Mara was dragging her suitcases through Logan Airport with a carry-on full of sketchbooks and the kind of hollow calm that settles in after a storm has already done its damage. Boston in early December smelled like cold stone and wood smoke. The sublet had a radiator that knocked through the night and windows that looked out onto a maple tree, stripped bare for winter. She set up her drawing table by the window the first afternoon and sat in front of it for an hour without touching a pencil. Then she made tea. Then she sat down and started drawing. Not for a client, not for a pitch, just shapes and lines and the way light moved through bare branches outside. It was the first thing she had made that was entirely hers in longer than she could remember. She was in the public garden on a gray Saturday morning, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, watching a pair of ducks navigate the frozen edge of the lagoon, when she first noticed Reed Carmichael. She didn't know his name then. She only noticed him because he was standing at the iron fence nearby, with a set of hand-drawn site plans spread across the top rail, pinning them against the wind with his forearm, and the drawings were extraordinary. She wasn't trying to look, but she was an architect. She couldn't not look. He caught her staring and didn't seem bothered by it. "Sorry," she said, "old habit." He glanced at the plans, then back at her. "You work in design?" "Interior architecture," she hesitated. "Mara Hollins." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition. Reed Carmichael. She didn't place the name immediately. She would later. She would look him up that evening and find his firm's website, Carmichael Studio, and recognize the riverfront development in Providence that had won 3 national prizes. And she would realize he had almost certainly seen her work, because Spencer had submitted her designs under Holt Properties' name to developers across the Northeast. And Carmichael Studio had competed for 2 of those same contracts. But that was later. In the garden, he just folded his plans carefully against the wind and asked if she wanted to walk, and she said yes, because Boston in December was cold enough that standing still felt like a punishment, and because there was something in the way he spoke that made her feel less like a woman in the middle of her life, falling apart, and more like a person having a conversation. She didn't tell him about the divorce that day. She didn't tell him about the baby either, mostly because she didn't know yet herself. She found out 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon at a clinic in Brookline, when a doctor she had never met before told her she was approximately 14 weeks along. She sat on the paper-covered exam table and felt the floor tilt under her feet even though she was sitting down. 14 weeks. She had been so consumed by the dissolution of her marriage, by the fog of stress and displacement, that she had chalked everything up to grief. The nausea, the exhaustion, the way food tasted wrong. She was going to have a baby, Spencer's baby, the baby of a man who had filed for divorce 3 days before he bothered to tell her. She drove back to the sublet and sat in her car in the parking spot behind the building for a long time. Then she called Diane, who came over within 20 minutes with groceries and the specific kind of quiet that only real friends know how to offer. That same night, 3,000 miles away, Spencer Holt was throwing a party. The photos appeared before Mara even heard the news from another source. Spencer and Juniper Cole, the influencer with 2 million followers and a face that photographers described as made for natural light. Standing in front of a fireplace in a Malibu rental house, champagne in hand, a diamond ring on Juniper's left hand catching every available light. Engaged. 6 weeks after filing for divorce from a woman he had been married to for 6 years. Mara found the posts because Diane's phone buzzed with a news alert, and she showed her without thinking, then immediately looked like she regretted it. Mara stared at the screen for a long moment. Spencer was wearing the cufflinks she had given him for their 4th anniversary. She recognized them instantly. Gold, square-faced, with a small architectural motif etched into the surface. She had designed them herself and had them made at a jeweler in the Pike Place market. She handed the phone back to Diane and went to the kitchen and stood at the sink. The ring, one caption said, was rumored to be a $200,000 custom piece. Juniper posted a close-up with the caption, "Finally found my person." Mara thought about all the times she had rearranged her schedule around Spencer's. All the pitches she had let him run. All the projects she had delivered without her own name attached. All the time she had made herself smaller so he could look larger. She thought about the words he had said during one of their last arguments, his voice flat, and certain the way it always was when he wanted to end a conversation. "You'd be nobody without my network. You know that, right?" She had said nothing. She had stood very still the way she always did when his words became weapons, and she had waited for it to pass. But standing at the sink in the sublet, she finally let herself feel the anger she had been holding in like breath for 2 years, and it burned clean and clarifying, like fire that removes deadwood. There was a knock at the door that evening, soft and measured. She opened it to find Reed standing in the hallway with a paper bag from the bakery down the street, and an expression that told her he had seen the same news. "I didn't know if you'd want company," he said. "I can leave." She stepped back from the door and let him in. He put the bag on the counter and didn't say anything about Spencer or Juniper or the ring. He made tea without being asked because she had mentioned once that she drank it at night. He sat across the kitchen table and waited. "I'm pregnant," she said. Reed didn't flinch, didn't shift backward, didn't recalibrate his expression into something careful and managed. He just looked at her steadily. "How are you feeling about that?" "Terrified," she said, "and strangely certain." He nodded, as if that made complete sense. "Then you'll figure it out." She laughed, which she hadn't expected to do. "You've known me for 3 weeks. "I've also seen your work," he said quietly. "Not the work with Spencer's company name on it. Yours. I recognized your approach the first time I saw those site plans online. Nobody details a spatial flow the way you do." She went very still. "How long have you known?" "Since the garden." He looked at her directly. "Spencer submitted your Lakeview installation concept to a developer competition I was also pitching 4 years ago. I lost that contract. I always thought those designs were too precise to have come from a real estate firm's in-house team." He paused. "I should have said something sooner. I didn't know how." The kitchen was quiet. Outside, snow had started to fall. 2 weeks later, Mara's attorney, Alice Drummond, called with something that changed the shape of everything. Alice had been reviewing the financial disclosures required for the property settlement when she found a clause in the original marriage contract. Standard language, easy to overlook, stating that all creative work product produced by either spouse during the marriage remained the personal intellectual property of the producing spouse. Not marital property, not company property, the creators alone. Spencer had registered 17 of Mara's design projects under Holt Properties' name with the U.S. Copyright Office. 17 projects. Their combined licensing and residual value, Alice said with controlled professional calm, was significant. He hadn't just left her. He had been constructing his entire developer reputation on her work for 6 years. And the clause in their own marriage contract made every single one of those registrations fraudulent. Mara listened to Alice walk through the legal architecture of what Spencer had done and felt something move through her that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite relief. It was comprehension, the specific clarity of a pattern finally seen whole. "He can't hold those registrations," Alice said. "And once we file the challenge, everything he's submitted under the Holt Properties brand gets flagged. Every project, every pitch, every relationship he built on designs that were never legally his." Mara looked out the window at the snow settling on the maple tree. "File it," she said. She didn't think about Spencer at all during the last weeks of her pregnancy. She thought about the baby, a girl. The doctor had confirmed at the 20-week scan, and she thought about a name. She settled on June, for no reason she could fully explain except that it felt like the beginning of something. She thought about the studio space Reed had quietly mentioned. His firm had available in Cambridge. Small but north-facing, good light. She thought about the projects she had sketched in the margins of her journals over the past 6 years that she had never shown anyone. June arrived on a Thursday morning in late April, small and certain and entirely herself. The labor was long and Mara did most of it with Diane beside her and Reed in the waiting room, because she wasn't ready to ask for more than that from him yet. When it was over and the nurse placed June on her chest, Mara cried in the specific way you cry when something you feared might be taken from you is suddenly solidly real and in your arms and looking up at you with dark, unfocused eyes. That same Thursday, the U.S. Copyright Office acknowledged the challenge to Holt Properties' 17 design registrations. The filings hit the news cycle by afternoon. Within hours, 3 major developers, who had worked with Spencer over the past 4 years, released statements saying they were reviewing their contracts. Juniper Cole quietly deleted the engagement announcement from her public accounts. The board of Holt Properties called an emergency session. Spencer called Mara's phone twice that evening. She didn't answer. There was nothing he could say that she needed. The story was already being told without him, told correctly, told in her name. Reed came by the hospital the next morning with coffee and a book of architectural drawings he had found at a used bookshop on Charles Street. He sat beside her while June slept in her arms, and the spring light moved through the window in long, quiet bands across the floor. "She looks like she already has opinions," he said softly. Mara looked at her daughter's face, the small, precise furrow of her brow, the fists already clenched. "She does," she agreed. Reed looked at Mara the way he always had, steadily and without calculation. "You don't have to decide anything right now, any of it." "I know," she said, "but I'm not afraid of what comes next anymore." She meant it. The fear that had lived in her chest for 6 years, the fear of being wrong, of being too much, of being nobody without someone else's name behind hers, was gone. Not because the future was certain. The future was wildly uncertain. She was alone in Boston with a newborn daughter, a legal battle still in motion, and a studio lease she hadn't signed yet. But the work was hers, the name on it was hers, the girl in her arms was hers. And for the first time in a very long time, Mara Hollins herself was entirely hers. The Stoics called it amor fati, love of fate. Not the love of easy things or painless things, but the love of what actually happened, because what actually happened shaped you into someone that nothing could have produced otherwise. Spencer Holt had taken 6 years. He had taken her name off her own work, her confidence out from under her own feet, and her future off the path she had been walking before she met him. But he had not taken the work. The work still existed. It was sitting in 17 copyright files, with her real authorship about to be restored to it. It was in the sketchbooks she had filled since she was 22. It was in June's sleeping face, which she hadn't planned for and could no longer imagine her life without. What someone takes from you and what is actually yours are not always the same thing. And the woman who understands that difference is the one who cannot be kept down. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever watched someone build their name on what you created, or felt yourself disappear inside someone else's version of your life, know this: the work survives. It always survives. Like this video if it gave you something real. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe to Mr. Arthur Stories, because there are more of these stories to walk through together. You are not the version of yourself someone else decided you were. You never were.